In the quest to reap the spoils from Facebook, Google, and other tech giants, the European Union Parliament has created a piece of legislation that best represents the entrenched and struggling industries in Europe. Examples being media, including television, music, film, but most importantly, their collecting society. As with all legislative power struggles between large sectors, it's the startups, content creators, entire creative communities, and the users that will be most impacted. We're stuck in the middle as collateral while the giants fight. So what is Article 11 and 13? Article 13 is now written as Article 17 in the Directive on Copyright in the Digital Single Market. And this includes a number of directives, including the infamous Articles 11 and 13, which have the most impact on the open internet as we know and love it. This copyright must be written into every country's national laws and implemented in full form by 2021. To further explain this, I quote from Wikipedia. The directive has generally been supported by newspaper publishers and media groups, but opposed by major tech companies and internet users, as well as human rights advocates. Two of the directive's articles have drawn significant discussion. Draft Article 11, Article 15 of the directive, known as the link tax, gives newspapers more direct control and reuse of their product, which may impact some internet services like news aggregators. Draft Article 13, Article 17 of the directive, tasks service providers that host user-generated content to employ effective and proportionate measures to prevent users from violating copyright. A broad concern with the directive is on the use of fair dealing through the directive and could quell freedom of speech. End quote. In short, directly from the legislative piece, I quote, "Online sharing service providers shall be liable for unauthorized acts of communication to the public, including making available to the public of copyright-protected works and other subject matter, unless the service providers demonstrate that they have blah blah blah, more and more legal language." In short, platforms like Facebook, YouTube, Reddit have to do their best job to contact the rights holders and get permissions to upload and have their copyrighted content on their website. All of it. So in other words, without a license, any copyrighted content will be taken down. And this content includes text, sounds, code, images, videos, basically anything. But what is copyrighted content, and to what extent is this enforceable? Are you wearing a Star Wars t-shirt? Disney may not like that, nor their upload filters. All content will be controlled and filtered by the website's content filtering system, which is a network of bots, or reported by the supposed rights holder. The filtering system must be set up by the website itself, but many of them are going to just reach out to a third-party company to build it for them. This content filtering system has to be able to provide near or exact matches for these types of listed content. Included in the system is to allow the copyright rights holder to update the list. But what could go wrong? So what's my opinion? Censorship doesn't have to come from the government to be considered censorship. If a government, in this case EU Parliament, works in close coordination with the private sector, and the private sector uses this tool to determine what is and what is not approved to post to the internet, we can consider this a form of economic censorship or suppression, not to mention the forms of political or social censorship that such a tool can promote. The opinion that Article 13 would be used for censorship purposes is not theoretical, but as Cory Doctorow illustrates, is already manifested in China. Quote, "The controversial measures in the new directive have been tried before. For example, link taxes were tried in Spain and Germany, and they failed, and the publishers don't want them. Indeed, the only country to embrace this idea as workable is China, where mandatory copyright enforcement bots have become part of the national toolkit for controlling public discourse." End quote. It's not a matter of if, but how self-interested parties will use this policy and its tools against opposing businesses and ideologies. So what kind of resistance has this met? Well, before the legislation passed, 5+ million signatures, including mine. On multiple instances, tens of thousands of demonstrators marched against it. Tim Berners-Lee, the guy that laid the foundation for the World Wide Web, spoke out against it. The Wikimedia Foundation has spoke out against it. The Electronic Frontier Foundation has spoke out against it. The Mozilla Foundation has spoke out against it. MIT Media Lab, and also the countries of Finland, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, and Poland have spoke out against it. When reputable orgs whose sole focus is not revenue, but rather a specific mission that contributes so much good to the World Wide Web speak out against it, then we should probably be concerned. So why did this pass? We're going to quote Cory Doctorow again on this one. Quote, "This is about giving a loophole-free tool to German newspaper publishers to get paid by Google. And the fact that it has to be loophole-free, or they think Google will jump through the loophole, means that they have to catch a lot of dolphins in their tuna net. I think that it's not that they want to censor all the rest of the internet. I think that just in their quest to get Google and Facebook and a couple other big American companies to share their spoils, they're willing to sacrifice everything else. It's not malice, it's depraved indifference." End quote. What are the concerns that this brings us? Well, forget posting a GIF of a touchdown or a goal. Forget lip syncing to a video and using that music in the video. Forget the open and free internet. Forget the fabric of our international connected society. Forget anyone, anywhere, wanting to take part in creativity for the sake of creating. There are exemptions such as quotation, criticism, review, caricature, parody, pastiche. So memes are okay. Or are they? How do the upload filters distinguish all this? Supporters of Article 13 in this new copyright directive are lost in their idealism and the practicality of enforcing such a thing. Say for instance that something that you create, in a sense, is flagged on YouTube. What do you think the amendment process is going to be like? How long do you think it's going to take? And who has the energy to go through the amendment process when they've just created something for the sake of creating? This is one of the greatest critiques of Article 13, the review process. The review process will be completed by a system of bots, which mainly raises a concern for false flags, but also abuse by competitors, large businesses, religious, and social institutions. Furthermore, the amendment process is still unclear. So how long will the review process take? A lengthy review process due to an automated mistake or a false submission by a supposed rights holder could adversely impact the revenue of a content creator. Quick to penalize, slow to amend, what could go wrong? Furthermore, large companies that were targeted by this act, such as YouTube, have millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to invest into a content filtering system. They'll adapt, they always do. Google has already invested $100+ million in a content filtering system. They already profiteer from this content filtering system. The websites with the most amount of content have already had the funds and times to create a content filtering system. They've already adapted, they're prepared for this, but the ones that haven't are collateral. To come into compliance and keep in compliance, smaller businesses in Google face a huge roadblock, and that's funding. There are exemptions for smaller sites when they meet the following tight criteria. 1. They must have been available to the public for less than 3 years. 2. A turnover of less than 10 million euros annually. And 3. Less than 5 million monthly users. While some sites are okay, those sites that are too big but much smaller than the tech giants are the ones that are hurting the most. These reputable potential alternatives to the likes of Google and Facebook are stifled. So while the tech monopolies get stronger, old media reaps a profit, and everybody else is just squashed. So what should happen? As quoted from Communia, quote, "Not every unsanctioned use of someone else's content is an infringement. Copyrighted works are regularly used without permission and quotation, parody for private use, or under another exception or limitation. The filter likely will not recognize these types of uses, and as a result, the legal use of protected material will be constrained. This type of a system, combined with an ineffective redress mechanism, will create a chilling effect that will thwart users' rights online." From the perspective of European case law, the upload filtering goes against existing CJ/EU rulings, in particular the Sabum versus Netlog case. Hosting providers would be likely to be included in the wide range of online service providers affected by the proposal, even though they are explicitly excluded from any broad obligations to filter content in the Sabum ruling. In that case, the CJ/EU made up a point to note that filtering threatens freedom of expression. Filter systems fail to strike a fair balance between copyright and the freedom of providers to conduct business, not to mention the ability of users to secure their personal data. Within the current technological environment, the content recognition system proposed by the directive is equal to a system for filtering information considered by the CJ/EU. As such, the Commission's proposal is in contradiction with the e-commerce and EU case law. The EU legislator should make sure additional requirements placed on online platforms take users' rights into account. Any measures employed to settle disputes over the use of copyrighted content by users must respect fundamental rights. Additionally, users should have access to transparent information about the functioning of measures and/or procedures as proposed by the EU legislator to target copyright infringement. This information must be verifiable by the affected users, and users need to have meaningful ways to contest decisions regarding or actions against their uploaded content. Member states should be obliged to ensure access to courts for users whose rights may have been infringed by the measures taken. Finally, users should be represented in any fora which attempts to define best practices for functioning of the agreements and proportionate applications of any measures." End quote. To me, there is yet a legitimate argument that emphasizes and illustrates that this legislation is beneficial to the fabric of the internet, which is its users and its interactions. While the large pre-internet companies whose self-interests are protected by this legislation and this copyright directive do contribute to the architecture and infrastructure of the internet, they are by no means irreplaceable. As with any system that is constituted and made up of a populace, it's the populace's attitudes, opinions, and trends that keep it functioning. Article 11 and 13 doesn't protect the users or their content. It does quite the contrary. Not only will users experience an abrupt change in content, those that produce the content that we users love and appreciate could be suffocated and put out of business by this legislation. Article 11 and 13 must be either amended or deleted. It has no space in this open internet society that we love and appreciate. The world changes, and old ways need to be left behind or need to evolve and adapt if the users and the populace of the internet finds that they're harmful and irrelevant to the ethos of the internet. The best way to break up the status quo and too big to fail businesses is by letting the populace exercise its will, and that's democratic. The fact that a declared parliamentary democracy such as the EU has decided to take legislation down this path in this type of way is nothing short of hypocrisy and plays into the hands of special interest groups. On one hand, the legislators ignore their constituents. On the other hand, they're vastly out of touch with what constitutes the World Wide Web. They listen to aging but powerful voices while ignoring the majority. How is that democratic and how is that representative? The language of those that oppose this legislation is strong and in my opinion correct, but in the face of special interests and their available political and economic resources, we must be loud.